schools around the country are open. Most children are back at school. There are concerns about the high dropout rate, but millions of children are only going to school every second day or every second week. It's a process that's called platooning. It helps to keep a social distance between each child in the classroom, but it also now appears to mean that many children aren't getting the school meal they are supposed to get every day through the school nutrition program. Sasha Stevenson is the head of the Health Rights Program at the organisation Section 27. Sasha, good afternoon to you. The program normally feeds, I think it's around 9 million children a day. It can be higher than that sometimes. How many children are not getting the meals they're supposed to get at the moment? Is it possible to get a figure?
Well, it's quite difficult, Stephen, to ascertain exactly what the figure is. The department, in its reporting to the court, in terms of the court order that we obtained earlier this year, says that 7.7 million learners are currently accessing food through the school nutrition program, and that's out of a normal 9.6 million learners. What's difficult to tell, though, is whether those 7.7 million learners are getting food every day, regardless of whether or not they're at school. And different provinces have different plans for getting food to learners on days they're not at school. And so we've asked for clarity from the department because, of course, it's so important that learners are getting meals every day that is ordinarily a school day.
I mean, there are different ways to do this. It would be easy to say that children should just come to the school that they go to, but a lot of children actually go to a school quite far away from them. It's a mission for them and the entire family to get them there if they're not actually going to go to school.
That's exactly right. It can be very difficult to get to school. And in some provinces, we understand that learner transport is being provided so that learners can get to school to get food on the days when they ordinarily would be at home in terms of tuning or rotation system. But for other learners, they're not getting that transport and they're not able to get to school. And you're right, there are very simple ways of doing this. You know, there is the option of food parcels. There's the option of provision of a packed school meal on days when learners are at school so that they can take it home for the following day. None of this is impossible, but we need clarity from the department to make sure that it is in fact happening and that the 7.7 million learners who we understand are benefiting from the program at the moment are benefiting every day, and that there's an increase to the 9.6 million learners who should be benefiting from this program.
So what should the department do? I mean, you mentioned that different provinces have different plans. Now, I fully accept that Gauteng is very different to Mpumalanga or to the Northern Cape, for example. Does there need to be a bit more consistency, do you think? Or does someone somewhere need to do a very quick best practice study and make sure that people are actually, that someone somewhere is making sure this actually works?
Yes, and of course that's the obligation of the National Department of Basic Education. You know, they're responsible for dealing with the education system broadly and ensuring that provinces are implementing what they're supposed to be implementing and carrying out their obligations. So there is a structure that's in place to ensure that provinces are doing the right thing. Of course, it won't be the right thing won't be the same in each province. But there is someone who should be monitoring, and that's the National Department of Basic Education. And there are options available, and different provinces have shown that they can use different options.
There should be, I would think, there should be money in the system for this. And the reason I say this is that at the beginning of the school year, this would have been budgeted for. And then, in fact, a large number of school days this year, they weren't school meals because the schools were closed and the school meals weren't being distributed in all the provinces except for the Western Cape. So there should be money available, right?
That's right, exactly. The National School Nutrition Program is funded through a conditional grant, so it's a pot of money that's set aside at the beginning of every year, and this isn't a situation where there isn't money. The money's available. We understand that there were savings, so-called savings, during the period when schools were closed, and so that money now needs to be allocated to ensure that learners are now getting food. Because what the court said and what we know to be so important is that this program is fundamental to the realization of the rights of learners, both to basic nutrition, which is a right in the Constitution that accords to children, and it's a component of the right to basic education. And both of those things are immediately realizable rights, and they're so important for ensuring that the education of learners can continue unabated.
I hate to be so cynical, Sasha, and I really hope I'm wrong, but someone hasn't found another use for the money, right?
We hope not. We don't know for sure, but the department has said that has shown how it is reallocating the funds that were saved towards things like food parcels, etc. So it does seem that the funding is being used within the program, and there is not an obligation in terms of the requirements of conditional grants that funds be used within the program. So we don't think that this is a money problem. This is really an implementation problem. But it's unacceptable that we're not getting it right.
So talk to me about the longer-term impact. I mean, we all know that 2020, this year, hopefully not next year, but maybe next year, are going to have long-term impacts on all of us. It seems to me that the younger you are, the greater this impact might actually be, and school meals is a big aspect in that.
Absolutely. You know, the reason that the National School Nutrition Program was brought into effect, and it was brought into effect very early in our democracy in the 90s, was to make sure that learners had basic nutrition that they would need for their development and would be able to concentrate at school. Now, we've already had such a disruptive year, and learners have had to deal with working from home, with having difficulties getting back into school, with all of the health and related stresses that exist and the economic stresses. And to add to that not all learners are getting a meal that they're entitled to and that has been budgeted for every day, just makes this year so much more difficult. And you're right, has long-lasting impact. Because the reason we need to ensure that learners are getting food is for their development, their physical and mental development, and for their ability to learn. And we can't take that away from learners, particularly in the midst of such.
So one of the reasons you and I are talking is because of the second day or the second week phenomenon. In other words, children not going to school every day. And this is because of what's called the platooning system, where you go to school every second day or every second week to allow for social distancing. But the medical evidence at the moment is that, from what I can see, the coronavirus is not actually spreading through schools. Now, I accept fully that the teachers have a right and should be concerned, particularly elder teachers, of this virus. But it brings into a question about whether we should end platooning and get schools back to how they were at the beginning of the year, or let's say as they were last year. Do you have a view on that? Would it be too early to do that? Or do you think that maybe, this would actually solve so many of the other problems that schooling throws up?
Well, I'm not sure that I'm best placed to answer that question. What I do know, though, is that learning has been so disrupted, and the feeling of learners have been so disrupted. And so however we do it, whether it's a full return to school, whether it's the provision of food parcels and learning materials for learners, whether it's the provision of meals for every other day, we need to ensure that learners are able to get back to as close to as normal as possible. Because food is an important part of the realization of their rights, an important part to ensure that the children in the country are able to develop as they should be able to.
Sasha Stevenson, head of the Health Rights Program at Section 27. I really do appreciate the time with us here on Newsfeed this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed.